We begin with that breaking news where the search for 64 passengers and 3 Army soldiers has turned into a recovery mission after a plane and helicopter collided mid-air over Washington, D.C.
This is a live look at the crash site right now. Rescue crews searching the wreckage in the Potomac River, which is a chilling -1 degree.
This morning, President Donald Trump has spoken, calling the incident a tragedy. 9 US correspondent Jonathan Kersley begins our coverage.
It's the tragedy on the Potomac.
What happened?
Oh my God!
Around 9 o'clock last night, and Flight 5342 collides with a Black Hawk helicopter on approach to Reagan National Airport.
This was a dark and excruciating night in our nation's capital and in our nation's history.
64 people, including American figure skaters, were on board the plane. 3 people on the helicopter. Officials say there will not be any survivors.
We are now at a point where we are switching from a rescue operation to a recovery operation.
There is now an investigation into the worst air disaster in America in 15 years. Air traffic control audio captures the tragedy. Operators talking to those on the helicopter.
Pass 25, get 0J in flight. Pass 25, pass 100, 0J.
The Black Hawk pilot confirms the sighting and asks for a visual separation. Seconds later, the military helicopter was on a training exercise.
It was a fairly experienced crew and that was doing a required annual night evaluation. They did have night vision goggles.
President Trump says this was avoidable.
There was a lot of vision, and people should have been able to see that, you know, at what point do you stop? At what point do you say, wow, that plane's getting a little bit close?
We will not rest until we have answers for the families and for the flying public.
Yes, so many answers so far are eluding them. A 9 US correspondent, Jonathan Kersley, joins us now from Ronald Reagan National Airport in Virginia. Jono, good morning to you. What is happening as we go to air this morning?
As we go to air, Carl, the recovery operation continues in the very chilly waters of the Potomac River. Those police boats have been there throughout the night as it went from a search and rescue to a recovery, and now the investigation led by the National Transport Safety Board that will essentially be looking at how these 2 aircraft managed to be in exactly the same spot at the same time. We've already heard the Transport Secretary say that both were on what they call a standard flight pattern, but how did it happen? The Defence Secretary says the crew on board the Black Hawk helicopter was fitted with night vision goggles, and President Donald Trump, in his lengthy press briefing at the White House a short time ago, indicated that the Black Hawk helicopter may have had a pilot problem. But at the same time, he made this political, suggesting that what he calls diversity, equality and inclusion hires within the air traffic control system may have weakened the air traffic control network and contributed in some way to this collision. Here's some of what he had to say.
These are not people that should be doing this particular job. They'd be very good for certain jobs, but not people that should be doing this particular job.
I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense.
So as you can see, those boats remain in the water of the Potomac River at the wreckage and the crash site where that American Airlines plane in the water, so too the Black Hawk helicopter. And there are families of 67 people now desperately wanting answers as to how this tragedy happened. Everybody on board that passenger plane and the military helicopter is now feared dead.
Terribly difficult recovery mission too. Jono, thank you. Jane.
Police are investigating whether organised crime is behind a number of anti-Semitic attacks in Sydney, as a 3rd man is linked to that caravan filled with explosives. Live to 9's Bianca Balza at Sydney Police Centre. Bianca, this 3rd man was already in custody.
That's right, Jane. We are learning more about the people that police have linked to this investigation after the discovery of that caravan, which was packed full of explosives, enough, it is said, to have created a blast zone of 40 metres. Now, police believe that the people they have in custody now are only on the periphery of this plot and that there's some so-called mastermind who is controlling every move. Now, two of the people we know so far are Scott Marshall and Tammy Farrugia. They have been named on a federal police search warrant related to this incident at Dural. They were already in custody. Tammy Farrugia is charged with an anti-Semitic attack in Woollahra in December this year. Now, she was seen to have posted on social media asking if anyone was selling a caravan, saying that she needed one as soon as possible. Now, as you say, Jane, a third man has been connected with the incident at Dural. He was already in custody. He was arrested earlier this month after the discovery of 8 so-called kill cars. Now, these are cars with allegedly cloned number plates. They were also allegedly found with jerry cans of fuel in the back in Fairfield East. Now, police say none of these people have actually been charged as yet, and police say they don't actually have any specific ideology that would lead them to believe that these people would commit hate crimes. So now they're looking for the person who is perhaps pulling these strings, wondering who they are and what it's going to take to stop them now. Jane?
Bianca, thank you. Amid growing fears of anti-Semitic attacks, Victoria Police has stepped up patrols to combat the violence. Live to today's Christina Hearn, who is outside the remains of the Adass Synagogue in Ripponlea. Good morning to you, Chris. The Chief Commissioner says protecting the Jewish community is a high priority.
Yeah, that's right, Jane. So as such, up to 5,000 officers have been deployed to suburbs like Ripponlea, where I am, Caulfield as well, which have borne the brunt of anti-Semitic attacks. They are doing things which are like patrols of buildings which might be targeted, just to give assurance to the public. Shane Patton has told The Age that since the October 7 terror attacks which sparked the war in Gaza, there have actually been 160 anti-Semitic attacks in Victoria, which has resulted in 70 arrests. Now, those attacks include the firebombing of the Adass Israel Synagogue behind me, which has been declared an act of terrorism. In fact, Shane Patton actually visited this site this week to see the damage for himself, an attack which he has declared as horrendous. Despite this, despite the surge in anti-Semitic attacks in Victoria, Shane Patton says there is no evidence, there is no intelligence at this stage to link the recent Sydney caravan incident with any kind of anti-Semitic attack in Melbourne. Despite that, he says that protecting the Jewish community in Victoria is at the top of his list. Jane.
Chris, thank you. Investigators will return to the scene of a massive double factory fire in Melbourne's south, trying to piece together how that blaze began. It is believed the fire was fuelled by thousands of lithium batteries. The damage bill expected to soar into the millions. The Firefighters Union claims 2 trucks suffered major malfunctions when battling that blaze. Melbourne's most wanted man has been laid to rest after hundreds of mourners attended his funeral in the city's north 2 days after he was shot dead in a hotel car park. It's understood Sam Abdulrahim planned to leave Australia yesterday after months of being on the run. Police will keep up patrolling the northern suburbs over the coming days. 6 people have spent the night behind bars, including 2 17-year-olds, all charged with attempted murder after a shooting in Adelaide's north. 3 bullets were fired into a home at Andrews Farm, injuring a man who police say was not the target. They're accused of being linked to a crime gang, while the victim was left so terrified he moved out of the property. An emergency declaration has now been revoked in Brisbane's north after a structure caught fire in Kedron yesterday afternoon. It happened around 4:30 at a commercial site, spreading to 3 industrial sheds, leaving 1 firefighter in hospital suffering from heat exhaustion. Aussie golfing great Greg Norman is once again flying the flag, this time on a delicate diplomatic mission to deliver a message to Donald Trump. Live to Today Federal Politics reporter Liz Daniels in Canberra. Liz, the Shark isn't giving too much away though.
He's been tight-lipped, Jane, but if deals are done on the golf course, then diplomacy can be too. Greg Norman revealing he's been once again called on to bridge the gap between Australia and the US president. He won't say whether the request came from Canberra or the Australian Embassy in Washington, but in an interview with my colleagues at the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, the Shark simply said there was a request put through and that when he put his plan into action, it worked. We'll just leave it at that. He did confirm that he didn't have anything to do with the meeting between our ambassador Kevin Rudd and the president at West Palm Beach. That happened before the inauguration. Now, back in 2016, Norman passed on President Trump's phone number to then Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. And though this interaction, Jane, is shrouded in mystery, Norman says he's happy to accelerate relationships with leaders on both sides of politics.
Good to know, Liz. Thank you. The federal government will today begin to unveil its initial segment of social housing as part of its signature Housing Australia Future Fund. The $10 billion fund uses investment returns to fund housing projects. Building has already started on around 800 new homes spread across the southern states, with most of this first round concentrated in Victoria. A resurgence in tanning amongst young people is believed to be fueling a rise in melanoma cases in Victoria. A recorded spike of 10% in the last year has prompted the Cancer Council to urge people to be more sun smart. The warning comes as UV levels are set to hit extreme highs across the state this weekend. Towns in far north Queensland have been inundated with almost a metre of rain in just 3 days as a tropical low strengthens off the state's coast. It saw travel between Townsville and Cairns halted after a truck became stuck in the deluge.
Don't be lulled into a false sense of security. There is the prospect of more rain to come.
Potentially life-threatening flash flooding is possible this weekend.